and welcome to another episode of Richmond Real Talk, where you can find real teens having real talk about real stuff. This is your host, DJ Silver, currently recording live here, well not live, but currently recording here at the Richmond Teen Center. And tonight, we actually have a very, very special podcast for everybody out there tonight. Now, usually there's a formula that we follow, but every now and then we have a special edition podcast, which kind of deviates away from the formula so that we can really get into depth with it. With that being said, before I go ahead and introduce both of our panelists or our people that will be talking on the podcast, I wanted to first and foremost say something really fast. We live in a pretty chaotic world. I'm not the person that believes that it's more chaotic now than it used to be. The world's always been pretty crazy and chaotic. And I think history has told that. But we are, as a species, heading towards a trajectory that's very, very crucial, especially at this point in time. And I think with that being said, one of the most important factors with this trajectory that we're going on to, and one of the most important characteristics and traits that we could have as a species, is compassion. And compassion is something that is being slipped away and lost, but there's still some of it there. And if we could learn to really hone down that compassion for one another, then we could really take control of the trajectory. With that being said, let me go ahead and introduce first, you've heard him many, many times on the show. We do pronounce his name, well, not the correct way, but we'll go ahead and pronounce it the correct way tonight. Please please introduce yourself. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Solomon. That's actually my name. It's my government name.
Your slave name?
Definitely not my slave name.
Okay. I got a slave name.
I don't. I wasn't a slave.
What, this is your first time doing this podcast? You would tell them your age, what school you go to?
Oh, my age. I'm 18. I currently go to Shoreline Community College.
Alright. When you turn 19?
In August.
In August? Oh, wow. You still got a while. Okay. And our next guest, very, very first time he's been here on the podcast, we have, well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, my name's Officer Greg McKinney. I met Solomon about 5 years ago, his freshman year of high school. We've been friends ever since. We had some good and bad times, but in overall, we've been friends the whole time.
I'm really looking forward to hearing about these good and bad times. I really want to hear it.
So we can talk about the good, maybe not the bad.
I wanted to ask more about your experiences in being a cop and how, public perception of that.
Sure.
Well, I know a little bit of the bad, so I guess we'll be from there. You told me a fair share. Anyway, so usually how we start out is we have a quote of the day, then we have the topic of the day, then we have the teen's choice. But we've been planning this for a while, and we've been talking about it for a while, and at first it didn't seem too concrete. But as the podcast went, as time kind of came, I felt, first off, I want to say thank you both for being here, because I know it's something that both of you were a little hesitant on doing, but this is really, really one of my focuses and one of my aims and one of the reasons why I chose to do this podcast. And what makes it so special is because this is the first time for me that we've actually had an officer who's willing to come in here and talk and engage with youth. And we also have a youth who knows this officer, who has some history with this officer, who's also of Afro-American descent. And to be able to open up the platform to have this conversation is really, really big. And I'm really, really happy that we're here right now doing this. So with that being said, let me go ahead and shoot it on over to Solomon. Solomon.
Yes.
There's a bunch of questions that you have.
Yes.
Correct. So let's go ahead and start delving into some of the questions and getting this thing rolling.
All right. So I had a lot of questions during the time span of me thinking about what I'd want to ask you. This might sound like a loaded question at first. I promise you it's not.
Sure.
Could I ask, though, how often when you, ever stop somebody or arrest them, are they African American?
Oh, geez. I really couldn't I really couldn't put down a number because as they come, I do.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not looking specifically for a color or anything. You know, if I see a violation on a traffic stop, I'm normally enforcing a violation. You know, a lot of perception out there is that we're targeting or profiling, but they really keep a good record of what we do. On every citation, it says what race, what gender, what the violation was for. So basically, it all goes on the spreadsheet. And if you see an officer or an officer gets investigated for, you know, profiling, they're going to pull these sheets and it can show a profile of what these officers have been doing. And if you see a big majority of a certain race, it'll stick out like a sore thumb and that officer could be in a lot of trouble.
All right.
So there's safeguards.
All right. You kind of answered the follow-up question I was going to ask you, and I was going to ask, because of public perception of how cops are viewed as like targeting African Americans, do you ever feel like if you do like pull over or stop a person who is African American, do you think you're kind of like walking on eggshells, or like at least for other officers as well, like do other police officers ever think I might have to be a little more careful because if something bad does happen, they're going to be portrayed as like the racist or like they're doing something?
Yeah, it's hard for us because you can think of us out there just, you know, making all these traffic stops, but it doesn't really happen that often. And if we make one bad mistake on any given day, we can be terminated. Our jobs are out there, so on every moment that we're out there, we're being cautious. And I always tell people when I'm training new recruits, say basically consider yourself always being on camera. Know that whatever you do, it's being recorded. Act accordingly. So if you're doing the right things and it's recorded, everything's fine. If you're doing the wrong things and it's recorded, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
So let me just interject real quick because obviously there is some history between you two, which is unfortunately not very common for there to be a substantial relationship between a cop and between a young Afro-American teen, especially one that is male. So why don't we talk a little bit about that history? You said you've known Solomon since he was a freshman about 5 years ago. Solomon, I'm sure you have some fond memories of Officer McKenna over here. So why don't we talk a little bit about that relationship, that history, and how y'all got to really know each other?
It was nothing more than me being a school resource officer when we first met. And he actually came up to me, I believe. I don't remember the exact comment, but he introduced himself. And I believe he said something like, "Hey, I'm Solomon." And you reached out to shake my hand. And you said some silly comment. I don't really remember. But I remembered your name from that point because it's nice to have someone come up to me and break that ice where I didn't have to go up to him and break ice.
So you just randomly walked up to him and introduced yourself as a freshman?
Here's my thing. Is that before that, middle school, I got myself in a lot of trouble. And so, like, from very early on, I was already marked by most staffs as just a troublemaker. So, like, every time I was in the office, I'd never get the benefit of the doubt. There was, like, the moment I'm in there, it's like they know for a fact I probably was doing something. So, my freshman year, what I thought, the first thing I did after, like, the, like, assembly to let all the freshmen in, I actually went straight to Principal Dunbar, and I shook his hand and like greeted myself to him because like if I ever get myself in a scenario where I'd end up in his office or something, he might look at me slightly more favorably. So with Greg, I thought, especially because he's a cop, I was like, I don't know this guy yet. He doesn't know me. If I act like an idiot, I don't know what's gonna happen. Or if I'm in a scenario where I end up doing something stupid, which, spoiler alert for the people who don't know this so far, ends up happening.
If our listeners have been habitually listening to this podcast, they know that there's no spoilers.
Okay, good.
You've been pretty out note.
Yeah, but okay. I wanted to make sure I was like already like on favorable terms with him.
Yeah. So that's actually really, really profound because not a lot of teens would do that. It doesn't really matter what color or gender. Well, actually, I take that back. It may matter a little bit, but not a lot of teens would do that. That's something that I wouldn't have done and never did in high school, or never would even think of. Granted, I was coming from a different area. It's a little bit.
I really respected that, and I reciprocated that along because Solomon's freshman year was my freshman year as a cop inside the school. So I was,
wow, that was your first year. Okay.
we were meeting each other for the first time, but throughout all my years in the school, I mean, Solomon can tell you, I would meet and I would talk to pretty much anybody in the school. I really enjoyed that job. That's a pretty fun job for me.
And you're still there, right?
Nope, I'm working on the streets now.
Oh wow, so you're not at Shoreline anymore. Oh wow, I remember seeing you all the time when I go there.
Yeah, it was sad. It was, pretty sad for me.
Yeah. Well, at least you're still around.
I'm still involved with the teenagers.
So let me ask you a little bit. Would you mind giving a little bit of history on how you became a cop and kind of where your mindset was and everything? I know you can't go into too much detail, but just whatever you can talk about.
I don't mind, and this really helped me, relating to the kids because I came from a broken family. I'm of Asian descent, so being a minority, talking to minorities, I felt really helped me. It broke a lot of ice. I don't feel people felt I looked down at them, and I felt like I was equal to most people. So my parents divorced. My dad took off to the Philippines, and my mom couldn't afford the mortgage of our house when we lived in Hawaii. So I ended up living in a car for several months until she could get an apartment to live. Well, she found a boyfriend that didn't want me to live there. So I was living on the street, trying to find places to live, and it really helped me understand that, what homelessness was like, not having a place to call your own.
And this was still in Hawaii?
Yeah, in Hawaii as a teenager. I learned this lesson early on. And then you talk about later on when you start stealing. So when I talk to kids about stealing, I remember this choice I had when I walked into a grocery store. I started doing it pretty often, but when you have a choice to either steal for food or go hungry, you'll do some crazy stuff. So I remember going to that store, and I would steal sandwiches, and it got easier and easier, and I would go back and I would steal sandwiches because I was hungry, and I remember that. So one of the things you probably don't know is every time I come to the teen center, I'm always bringing pizzas. Majority of the time I'm bringing food. Because I knew what it was like to be a teenager and not have a place to go and not have something to eat. And yeah, it's not much, but I can only do so much. I can bring a couple pizzas every week. And to me, it makes a difference because it still makes me shake, thinking about it. Because it's pretty heartfelt when you're at the lowest point in your life and you have to make a decision of stealing. So my mom broke it down for me one day, and she asked me if I ate anything. I said, oh yeah, I had some sandwiches. Because I had a hard time lying to my mom. So yeah, I had some sandwiches. And she says, well, where'd you get the money? And your mom, you guys probably know, your mom's knowing you're lying. So
yeah.
She knew I was lying. She took me back to that store, took me to the manager and said, my son's been stealing. He actually knew I was stealing, but he kind of looked after it. He ended up giving me a job, and every day after school I'd go there, sweep the floors, take out the trash, and he'd give me the day-old sandwiches. So
oh, wow.
It was pretty cool.
Okay, so it did work out. Okay.
Good guy, so it got me through that portion. At least I could go there. If I wanted a sandwich, I just clean up, take out his trash. And I learned a pretty good lesson. And I brought that with me as a cop, through my life, because I understand what it's like to be there. So when I am on the law enforcement side and someone steals, it's not like I'm looking at them like they're the worst person in the world. It's I know I can empathize with them.
So that was a mentality that you had already when you chose the profession to become a cop. It wasn't something that was developed over your career.
No, just from childhood. You learn so much as a kid. You bring that into your adulthood. But like I said, my family was broken, so I ended up joining the military at age 17. From there, I went to basic training my junior year. Then I went back to high school. Ended up failing 1 year of high school because of the divorce, and I was just struggling with places to live. Then I went back into the Army my senior year, and I finished up basic and advanced training. And then from there, I went to infantry basic school. in Georgia, and then from there I went to a college in Missouri. It was a 2-year college, and after that I was able to get my commission as a second lieutenant. A long time ago, right when about Desert Storm was starting. So that's pretty much where I started. At that very same time, my brother became a police officer. You guys probably know that Desert Storm was over pretty quick. Our unit got deactivated. I went back to Hawaii. Found myself without a job. My brother was a cop. I thought, hey, at age 21, I was like, maybe I'll try it. My brother can do it, I'll do it. So I ended up being a cop, entering the academy at 21.
Was it an easy transition going from the military to becoming a cop?
Yeah, I would say so. The military helped prepare me for some of the stressors of law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd imagine that'd be a pretty smooth transition to go from that to becoming a cop. I remember when I first started working here, almost 2 years ago, and I would see you all the time come in. Mm-hmm. And I remember it took me a little bit of time for us to have our conversation.
Sure.
But I was happy when we did finally have because I remember it was one shift. We were sitting at the table and we must have talked for like an hour or two. And it was the first time for me, and I don't know if I told you that at the time, but it was the first time for me that I actually had a substantial, legitimate conversation face to face across the table with a cop.
Wow.
The thing for me is that, I come from, and I've mentioned on the podcast many times before, I come from California, and I come from the Bay Area specifically. And California in general, their cops get a bad rap. They're not known for being the best cops of the country. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that California is notorious for is the cops and the way they treat people. And for me, I've experienced a lot of that growing up. And a lot of, and even still living there as an adult, there's a lot of really bad situations that I got into with cops, mm-hmm. And how I felt that they could have handled certain things a lot better. So, me being from where I'm from, having the experiences I've had, having a Black Panther tattooed on my forearm, which is very, very visible.
I see that.
Yeah. A lot of people see it. So, and having the experience that I did and knowing what the Black Panthers represent, for me, I was very, very hesitant around cops. And I could honestly say that with having that conversation and with working with you and, our other officer, that it really helped me a lot to become more empathetic and a little bit more understanding, but also to build that relationship, because I felt like that's something that's very important for police to build. And I know we talked about it. Police to build a sense of community, a sense of relationship with the people that they're serving. And sometimes that can get lost in translation. But I want to thank you for being able to do that and to kind of bridge that gap, because that doesn't happen a lot. And I think another thing that helps is Seattle is one of the cops in Seattle are a lot better than what I'm used to. Seattle, in terms of law enforcement, it seems like they're going in the right direction. They're doing things a little bit more right than what I'm used to. But yeah, it's that sense of building that community and building that relationship with the people that you're serving. And so, Solomon, let me ask you, have you felt that Greg has done that with you, or at least with teenagers around you, people that you've gone to school with, strive to kind of build that sense of relationship with the community that he's serving?
Yeah, actually, quite a bit, because
And be honest now. Be honest.
I'll be honest. Even throughout high school, I tease Greg a bit. I make a lot of jokes about him, doing, arresting me, stuff like that, and treating me bad because I am a young African American male. But if you went around Shorewood and you ask a lot of men like me, they all like Greg. They might not like police in general, but fully knowing Greg is a cop, they're he's perceived as a good guy.
So they can see past it.
Yeah. And it's I wonder if there can be a point where we can transcend, where it's, instead of just Greg, it's more and more police.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't think as a group, African Americans would be entirely willing to do that just yet. Because I still think, like, the image of police are still kind of
as a whole, like, as a country.
Yeah. Because I still think the image of police are still portrayed as, like, they're just intolerant towards blacks, or they purposely, like, profile stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I think a lot of that has to do with location. You know, the cops here in Seattle are very different from the cops in Oakland, which are different from the cops in San Francisco. Well, not really, but different from the cops in San Francisco, which I've been to St. Louis, Missouri. Very different from the cops over there. It's funny to see that how location and culture can actually shape something on a governmental level, like being a police officer. And I guess that's one thing that's been a positive. That's a positive influence. But I'm curious. So, what do you think it would take, Solomon, for that image to be gone, and for young Afro Americans to not have that kind of trepidation that they do have?
Well, first it starts with the children. That's the biggest one, because there's a certain point where it's like, I think you're like kind of a little too dead set in your beliefs, but like even down to like, I don't entirely fear cops, but at the same time I know not to act up around them. Yeah. And I think it starts with, because thankfully my father was in the house for at least the majority of my life, at least like while I was growing up, but like I think I can safely say this, that most younger black men at some point in their life had a talk to their like parents or like guardians or whoever in their family about police. Like, if you ever get pulled over a cop under any this is like what my father told me. Under any circumstance, just do what they say. Even if it seems BS, even if it seems like they're profiling you, just do it, because like they can be 100% in their right straight to shoot you in the head, like without a second thought.
I got that talk.
Right. So
I got that. Actually, it was my grandparents, my grandmother actually.
So do you think us reaching the kids first or the parents first would be more beneficial? Because if what you're saying is the parents are teaching the kids this, I think, man, us older cops got to reach the older generations, because we got to teach a new book. We got to change things on both sides. We've got a lot of change to do. But
the parents might be kind of tough, and the only reason why I would say that is because I think about my father, and I think about my granddad. Unfortunately, he's on his deathbed, but he's still alive. And I know if an officer tried to come up to them, unfortunately, they would shut it down very fast. Especially having been through the experiences they've been through. They're too much has happened. I almost feel like it wouldn't work as well. I feel like with children is an interesting perspective, because they're like sponges. They soak up everything. And it's funny because when I was a kid, and I might have said this on the podcast before, me and my cousin got in trouble when we were like in 3rd grade. And it's because I was working the lunch. And it was a big deal. I got to work lunch. You know, I got in trouble a lot in elementary school. It seemed like I always did stuff wrong. But to work the lunch counter, you must have done something right. You're either getting good grades or being really good. So I was really excited. I'm like, all right, I'm not screwing up. You know, I can get down and my cousin comes up to me, and he's a grade lower than me. And I remember I I let him sneak something off. Now, I wasn't paying attention because I was counting money and dealing with like 2 other kids. So he just asked, like, hey, let me get this. And I was counting money. I was like, yeah, whatever. And he took it. Ended up, the teachers found out. We got in trouble with the principal's office. And there was a cop in there. And this was the first time a cop was actually talking to me specifically. Usually I was just around when cops were around and stuff was happening. And I remember sitting with my cousin, and it could have been a really good learning moment. You know, the cop could have sat down and said, okay, look, you two, why'd you do this? You know, you shouldn't be doing this. Here's a reason. You know, it could have been a really good time to give a positive experience to a young child of a cop. Instead of him taking that route, when the principal was already done trying to discipline us, and when the other lunch lady was done trying to discipline us and scare us, and we're both sitting there, the cop comes up to us, and I remember exactly what he looks like. I remember dead in my mind. And I remember he doesn't kneel down, which is big. If you're going to confront kids at a level where you're not trying to scare them. They say in child psychology, kneeling down to their level actually helps them to open up and feel comfortable. So instead of doing that, as we're sitting down, he comes up to us and he towers over us. And then he said, yeah, you guys are lucky you're the age you are. If you're about 2 years older, I'll be slapping cuffs on you and putting you in the back of my car.
Damn.
Jesus.
I'm about 8 or 9 years old. My cousin's about 7 or 8. But you're saying this to children.
Yeah.
As he's towering over us saying this, right? And then that was the only thing he said. And then, you know, we got disciplined, whatever. But that was my very, very first experience with a cop directed towards me. And that was the experience I got, you know. And that was a kid. So that almost, you know, as a child having that happen, it's hard to kind of get those memories out and get those memories, you know, away and not have that kind of trepidation or that being hesitant.
That's one of the hardships I have. There's so many preconceived feelings about us as police officers. When I walk in, I feel so many people are guarded. But I can only do what I can do. I just try to break one barrier at a time, meet one person at a time.
Do you feel guarded as well?
I don't, unless it all depends. I mean, if we're going to someone with a gun, heck yeah, I'm going to feel a little more guarded.
Mm-hmm.
But for most things, 99% of the stuff I have to do, I don't have to be as guarded. Mm-hmm. I've been around enough people, you know, to read their body language and everything else, you know.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about this then, because we've already established the relationship between the two of you. Mm-hmm. And we know, you know, a lot of people know where I come from, where Solomon comes from, being people of color and kind of how we have that outlook. But as a cop, what are some of those, how do I put this? What are some of the things that you're trepidatious about? The things that you feel concerned about, scared of, or feel good about? Feel that we should enforce certain things. Kind of where you're seeing, where's your psyche and your mindset at? For
enforcement, or how I feel with dealing with people?
Just how you feel just about being a cop. You know, what things every day is on your mind? What are you always having to be concerned about when you put on the uniform? I
understand where you're coming from. I can honestly say I'm really glad to be a minority. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how much that helps my job, to be able to identify with other people of color.
You grew up in Hawaii too, which isn't really, I mean...
it's different, but I've learned a lot about cultures. I learned about, because even in the islands, there's difference, you know, between a Hawaiian and a Samoan. Mm-hmm. You could ask anyone here, they're probably, they're Polynesian, they don't understand, but there's a complete difference.
Oh, there's,
right?
There's feuds there, yeah.
Japanese,
I was made aware of that.
Japanese and Filipino. Oh, they're just Asians, right? But there's a complete difference. I learned a lot about different cultures, and I had a lot of respect. So when you translate it and it's different, you know, you got brown and brown, like Hispanics and blacks. I understand that they're just different cultures, and they're all different. We all have different cultures. So as I grew up, I understand and I learned that, and I respected it. But I also learned when I was growing up what it felt like to be on the other end of that stick. Meaning, you know, when I was growing up in California, Pacifica Elementary, down by Camp Pendleton, San Diego area, Oceanside, California, on December 7th, they would say it's Slap-a-Jap Day. Just because they would learn that in history, that on December 7th, the Japanese bombed the Pearl Harbor. And they were like, oh yeah, it's Slap-a-Jap Day.
And
unfortunately,
California.
In California.
Internment camps there too.
But at that school, I was the only Japanese kid. Uh-huh. And man, my back was against the wall because everyone wanted to slap me because it was Slap-a-Jap Day. Mm-hmm. So I found comfort in people of my own color with Hispanics and blacks because that's the closest I had. And I ended up hanging out with those groups of kids. So I felt very comfortable. So when I'm here at the teen center, it's like, oh, I feel okay. I don't have any barriers there. I feel bad for the white officers that are here. Because honestly, when I look, I know that people of color aren't giving them that fair chance when they see a white cop come in.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I was about to say.
It's not, right?
It's not even It's not even
if we're talking real,
yeah.
most people of color will treat a white officer coming in different than they will a minority police officer coming in.
That's 100% true.
Yeah.
I see that. I feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, imagine how these white officers feel when they're walking into that, thinking that everybody there is out to get them, that they're hated. Imagine how much guarded you would feel. So
The problem is being guarded like that for an extended amount of time results in bitterness.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that bitterness is, you know, that's where things kind of start to get a little tricky. So Solomon, I know you were supposed to do a ride along. For those who are listening that didn't know, so how this was supposed to go is Solomon was actually supposed to do a ride along with Greg, but that didn't happen.
I chickened out.
He wasn't ready for the real street life.
and it's still, the offer is still there.
Uh-huh.
Like, when you see me on the street, I wanted you to feel what I feel and what I see and what police officers do on the street in your own city. It's an open book for us. Like, I wanted you to come right along because, man, it would open your eyes.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about why you didn't want to do the ride along. I have a pretty good understanding on why, but I'll let you articulate it. I'm not going to speak for you. I'll let you articulate it the way you want to articulate it.
It was more because the way how I was taught to view cops, regardless of the circumstance, I just did not want to see myself in a cop car.
But you're in the front seat.
Even in the front, no, I'm not trying to be inside a cop's car under any circumstance. Just cause one of the things I always viewed police officers, and I still kind of do today, is that if you ever see a cop, in uniform talking to you, that's just an objectively bad scenario. So I don't see myself talking to a police officer dressed up in the circumstance that's good, with the one exception being whenever I was at school talking to you, or if I saw Jeremy every now and then.
You hit on something. You may not know this, but you hit on something. But when we look at this, when is the only time that people call cops?
When something bad is happening.
Right?
Yeah.
People call police when bad stuff is happening. How often do you see people call police when good stuff is happening?
No.
Never. So any view that you see a cop is when they're dealing with bad things.
Yeah.
It's hard for us. We never get to go and rescue a cat out of a tree. You know, we're never the heroes that way. We're always there on the fatality accidents, on the domestic violence, on the drunk person walking down the street, the fight that just happens. We're there in all negative contacts that anybody ever has. So we can never get in this good light with people. You can never, on any given day, say, I saw a cop and he was eating ice cream with a little kid. I mean, barely, maybe you'll see that on YouTube or something.
Yeah.
But that's not our normal thing. You don't get to see cops in their best light, ever. Because we're only going to really bad stuff.
And you've had I know me and you have talked. You've seen some pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, horrific
things. You've been
things.
through some traumatic things. I mean, I remember talking about Gary Ridgway because I had to do my paper on him.
Yeah.
And the fact that you transported him from here to Walla Walla, and you got to be in his presence.
Yeah,
even that alone is pretty.
Not to Walla Walla, but when we had him pulled out of maximum security, and I can't talk much about it, but to actually be looking at him through a window, that whole feeling is just a trip all by itself.
You felt that energy, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of
felt that vibration.
But yeah, to answer, gonna go back where we were. It's hard for us to be in that good light at any time. So I can see why most people are afraid, because the only time you have interaction with a police officer is on negative light.
Yeah, I can't blame Solomon, because when I was his age, if somebody would have came and asked me, I would have said no. I would have been a lot more frank and blunt with it. So that's why I couldn't really blame you too much. But I did go on a ride along, not at your age, about a year ago, with Jeremy. Actually, we went on a ride along, and it was very, very interesting, very insightful. I've been meaning to do another one because I want to do another one here, and then I want to do another one over in Burien.
Sure.
So I've been meaning to get into it, but it is really insightful, which will bring me to my next point. So you built this relationship with Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
You've built this relationship with a lot of teens. You know, I've seen it all over the place. I've seen it at both the high schools, at the dances that we've had, even at the Spartan Center.
Yeah.
I've seen you be very active in building a lot of that relationship, and I see a lot of teens of color that are comfortable walking up to you,
mm-hmm.
saying stuff, talking, kind of hanging out, which is very, very rare for me to see something like that. With that being said, there's a lot of turmoil going on, and because we live in the information age with so much information, so much video, everything's always being recorded, always being stated, you know. What are some of the ways, and this is to you and to Solomon, my question's opening up, what are some of the ways that you believe that we could start to fix this issue? Because it's a very big issue, a very known issue, and it's been a big known issue for decades now. What are some of the things that you as a police officer can say to help better those social parameters? And Solomon, what are some of the things that you would like to see, being a person very much in that situation, to fix those social dynamics and those parameters?
One, I think I would like to see. I think it's really interesting to hear how Greg talks about how him coming up throughout his life, going through poverty and stuff like that, helped him become the police officer who he is. And I don't think many at least from my point of view, I don't think many cops have that kind of background. So like they would handle almost, I would say, a lot of scenarios differently how Greg would handle. I think it'd be interesting if they would hear stuff like just coming in, not always like have the perception of somebody's being a criminal or something like that. Because I don't think Greg would view somebody as that. Can I ask you if you saw like a young poor teenager like try to swipe something from the store and got caught?
Yeah, I'll give a perfect example of one of our star athletes at Shorewood High School. This is several years ago now, but made a bad choice. He had a full ride scholarship to a college. On his way, he had everything done, and he did something that was almost a felony amount. I went above and beyond what I could do, took his case, took it right to court, worked out an agreement with the prosecutors to make it a civil fine so that he could pay this company back what he took. Kept it off his record. He got to keep his full scholarship to the school. I will go back, I will do whatever I can to help out. But when I talk to kids of color in school, I always preach, will some of you become police officers? And it's looked at negative. And even the Black Student Union, I went in there, and this day, it was a pretty good day because they probably had about 40 black students in there. And I asked them all, this is what I do. I really enjoy this. The reason why I'm good at this job and I enjoy it so much is because I had struggles. I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like to be homeless. I know what it's like to be a person of color. How many of you will do this and take over my job? Not one person would. And that was very sad because my career is coming to an end. If I don't train officers to take over this next portion, to learn how to talk to people, to how to, the way I believe is a good way, then we're going to lose whatever progress we're having. We need people that have struggled in their lives to become police officers.
And you, from what I could see and understand from your precinct, is y'all are pretty involved in trying to get to that next step. Doing that ride along, talking to various other people that worked in the precinct, even doing an interview with one of them where we were talking about this very thing about mental illness and what they were trying to do to combat that. This is a very progressive precinct. This is more progressive than a lot of the precincts I've known and a lot of the cops I've known. Which is sad. It's kind of sad because, coming from where I come from and notice how progressive and involved that your precinct tries to be, and I juxtapose that with a lot of things I know and the experiences I've known, I would think that having a precinct that has this mindset, more people, especially people of color, would be willing to jump in and try to switch that image. So Solomon, why do you think it's not that way? You think it's just too much damage has been done? Do you think it stems from being a child and just being molded? I mean, what's kind of your thoughts on that? I think
it depends on who it is to say if there's too much damage has been done. For someone like my dad's age, it's way too late. He's already a little too set in his views. But like, I think it really stems from who's teaching you, who's showing you police officers for your first time. Because it's like, again, to go back to me, I was taught don't act stupid around a police officer because you like it will end bad. And like that wasn't like a maybe, it was like a guaranteed. If you did something, if you act up around the cop, you're gonna get hurt. So I think a lot of younger African American men were taught if you see a cop, they don't like you, or you shouldn't like cops because whatever history has happened. So like I think what one way would be for us to teach the next generation of us that like not all police officers are bad, not to be scared, just as long as you try and stay out of trouble.
So let me ask you this, because let's reel it back a little bit. Freshman year, you introduced yourself to Greg, because you probably thought, hey, I might more than likely get in trouble a couple times.
Yeah.
I might as well make my face a little bit more known now.
Yeah.
But what's very, very substantial and intriguing about that is that you introduced yourself to him. You've had your experience in high school, and based off of how he could have been, you could have been like, F this guy, right? I hate this dude. I can't stand this cop. But it very much seems it's the exact opposite. That's not. What did he do throughout your high school experience that made that relationship better or made it the way it is?
This is gonna be kind of a weird way to answer this, but
because
I caused trouble to him.
I was gonna say because Greg was also kind of a jokester as well. He liked to mess around with people every now and then. Yeah. And so,
but
we know that.
But
yeah.
What I liked is, and you'll learn this later on, the people that joke around with you and have fun with you and cause trouble to you, they really like you. It's the problem you see is when they don't talk to you and they don't make jokes with you, they don't have fun with you, and then you'd be guarded, be worried. But we had some fun.
So he would just play into your type of humor, then, like your sense of humor and stuff. And I'm sure when you did get into slight predicaments at high school, he was able to help you out a little bit, or at least level the playing field, make it a little bit more fair and just.
Like, it was, anytime I did get myself in any slight scenario, I knew in the back of my mind, if I do talk to Greg, I know he'll have my back. Yeah. And I don't think there's that many that's not that a normal relationship.
That's not very common. Like, it's not very common that a man such as yourself would look at a cop and say, hey, I know this cop has my back.
I never had an arrest, Solomon. Let's just get that straight. I want to make that clear.
Almost, but thankfully not.
You got close a few times.
But to be honest, there's kids in school that I had to arrest. And even though I had to do the worst thing that I had to do is put handcuffs on somebody, I still maintained that bridge, that bond, and they knew that I wasn't doing it because I was being mean. It's just part of a job that I had to do.
So you train officers. Because I remember you said that you train them, you recruit them, you kind of. Now, in your training, and again, confidentiality, I'm sure is going to play a factor into this. But in your training, when you were working with these recruits and these young up and comers. Were they receptive to this mindset that you have and what you were trying to teach them, or were there a little bit of defiance? Has it worked out? Do you see anything resonating? Do you see any kind of synergy? Well,
these new kids, the way they're getting trained, being a cop now for almost 28 years, the stuff that they're being taught now is so diverse. They're so ready to be good cops. They're ready to meet anybody halfway. So when Solomon, it's a good example. If the other groups or citizens meet these officers and learn and talk to us, you're gonna find out that they're good. They're good guys and girls. They're just good people, and that's what we want. We want our police force to represent our communities. I want to look at 20 police officers, and I want to see several black officers in there, several Asian, several Hispanic. Our chief is Native American Indian. That's great,
That's huge.
right?
Yeah, that's actually huge.
I mean, we have a good diversity in our department, but that's what we want. And unless we continue to recruit people of color or diversities and mixed races, it's gonna look like one, and then it's gonna be one against the other. But if we all look like each other, it's hard to say, oh, they're being racist when we're all so blended.
And did you, kind of playing off on that, how is it seeing, because I'm assuming that life is different, the world is different when you have the uniform on versus off, right? When you're off duty and you're just doing your daily routines, going on vacation, going grocery shopping or something. How interesting has that been? Because it's almost like a paradox, because people are so guarded around you being a cop in your uniform. Does that go away when the uniform comes off? Is it a drastic change? I know most of the regulars probably know you as a cop already, so it doesn't matter.
The greatest thing I love, I mean, you guys see me without my uniform on. The greatest thing I love is when I'm dressed like this and I'm out in the malls, nobody knows I'm a cop. I don't perceive myself as a police officer. I blend in, right? If you saw me like this, just walking at Alderwood Mall, you'd be like, it's just the Asian dude, right? Right? He's just, right? But honestly, I don't walk around with, badges on my sweaters when I'm not working,
And it's a completely different world, right?
Mm-hmm. But I'm still alert. I'm still always looking for bad things that could happen.
Okay. So their guard never really fully comes down.
And I teach it with my family. Like if something bad's happened, I teach them to go to a safe spot or run. But even when we're off duty, if something bad happens, we have to respond. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that we're never really off duty. It's scary.
That's interesting, because I don't think that's something that a lot of people know about. That's something that slips my mind. Is that if even being off duty, if something happens, you still have to be responsible for that.
I ask this question sometimes, and this is a deep one, right? If I had to ask you, Solomon, out of your family, is there anybody in your family you would die for?
Yeah.
Right? Because you love your family, right? You love the people that you're closest around, you love completely. For a police officer, we can't think that way. We have to be willing to die for anyone. It's a deep thought.
It's a very tough thing to do.
It is.
Whoa.
So even my own family, we could be in a mall and something's happening. I can't just grab my family and run to protect them. I have to be willing to go into a fight to save somebody I don't even know at a moment.
That's a very, very, very hard thing to condition yourself to do.
It is.
I can't.
It's a mindset.
Yeah, I can't.
It's kind of surreal to think about.
Right? And I don't even know this person I'm rushing into to try to save. It's a deep thought, but...
Yeah. I wish, because unfortunately the majority of cops that have the mindset let me rephrase that. It's a very small minority of cops, from my personal experience. Now, I haven't been to every precinct. I haven't worked with every cop. This is really my first experience with it. So I'm a little naive. But throughout my personal experience, there's not a lot of cops I've met that have the same mindset that you have, or have the same temperament, or the same ideologies. And I really wish, especially in some specific areas that I used to be in and live in, that those officers would have that mentality, because I feel like it would be so much better. But at the same time, it's like a vicious cycle, from what I'm seeing. Cops use police brutality, people distrust, cops use brutality, There's built up frustration from both sides, and I feel like it keeps going like this in a circle. And it's hard to find where is the right part of the circle to cut it and to stop that.
Okay, I hear what you're saying there, but when I talked in school and I asked, because everyone can say, oh, tell me what you feel about police. Oh, they're bad, there's police brutality all over. But I asked the same group of people, how many of you have been abused by a police officer? It's crazy, and nobody in this group raised their hand. But everyone can say that the cops are bad, but they have not experienced it. So they're being taught this. They're being taught it, but they haven't experienced. So they're teaching something, they're spreading rumors of something they've never experienced and they've only heard of. If you legitimately got, beat by the cops, I want to hear your voice. I want to make sure that that's right. But what I don't like to see is when you have groups of people that would just look at a cop and say, all these cops are bad because I've seen the videos. I've seen them. They're bad. Imagine if we thought the same way, right? And we treated anyone of color the same way. We have to change. We're making the changes that we need to do. We need our community to surround us and make those changes too. Because when Shoreline, you just see that yourself, when you have agencies that are doing the right thing, everything that they're supposed to be doing, why won't that community surround them around them and be like, thank you, cops? I mean, I remember when I first started law enforcement, everyone loved cops. You could see posters of cops, kids holding the cops' hands. They were heroes. That's one of the reasons why you kind of want to do the job.
Yeah.
You're respected.
I think a lot of that comes into demographic, because there are plenty of people that I've known, and I only say this because being in college, college is, you'll debate city. I mean, if y'all think Facebook and Twitter can spark a lot of debates, wait till you get to college. But there is a good amount of support for cops. It's just, I hate to go this direction, but it's a certain type of demographic that has it. So when we talk about people of color, not a lot of support. When we talk about the other side, if we're talking about Caucasian, Anglo, middle class, even lower class, I've known even some lower class, working class, they are very supportive of cops, or at least more so are. It's just the people of color that have this hesitation. And a lot of the videos...
Why, Solomon?
Well, actually, no,
Help me.
Because I come from an area where it's very prevalent. There's many stories I could go through with cops that shape me to why I feel the way I feel. But Seattle and Shoreline specifically is a very different type of thing. So why is that trepidation here in Shoreline?
Because I feel like we're almost taught to be scared of cops, and at least for me, that's how I would respond. Like, I never had a bad experience with a cop because I try to duck police like the plague.
You just never.
I did not even want a cop like remotely even near me, and I never even gave that opportunity. So like, I think people respond to fear differently. I think it's literally just because the majority of African Americans are scared of cops. And I think the reason why is that I think there has been a history of cops doing wrongdoings toward African Americans. And I think still, even to go kind of fold back to what we were talking about earlier, that image of cops beating on black people still hasn't left the conscious of America. So I think that's why people still have that mindset towards cops.
Are we going in the right direction?
Yes, but I don't think at a very fast rate. I think like you being a police officer, you doing this, you training other younger police officers.
What will you tell your kids about cops?
First thing, if you ever get in a scenario with a cop, do whatever they tell you. That's the first thing.
So here, you're saying what your dad told you.
Yes, and here's why. I'm not scared of cops.
Okay.
By any means, but it's like they do have authority over you, whether you like them or not. So like, just don't. I would say 1, just listen to whatever they say.
Cool.
2, as long as you listen to them, I promise you, they will not shoot you or anything like that.
Cool. Yeah.
Because I still think, even by the time I would have children, I think there's still going to be people out there who are going to push this notion that cops are racist, cops are hunting black people and stuff like that.
You don't think that'd change by the time your kid is a kid?
I don't know.
By the time you have kids, I mean.
I'm not, I don't know. That's for the world to decide.
Well, I know one thing, again, bringing back our conversation that we had about a year ago or so. You talked about diversity in the precinct and how important that is. Not just in terms of race, but also in terms of background, in outlook. I feel that with that's a huge driving force that can invoke a lot of change and can heal a lot of the social struggles. The thing is that, you know, with I've seen a lot of diversity within cops, or within precincts rather, but not a fast rate of diversity. And I know that was one of your concerns, is that you have to get that diversity aspect within these precincts in order to see that change, because you have to have people that come from this community, that represent the community, be able to get into this precinct. But then again, that's where the struggle comes from, is that we have the mentality that we have growing up, going through experiences. I don't know, I guess it was different from you than for me.
Yeah.
My experiences were pretty harsh. But I think that's also what makes it kind of weird, because you haven't really been through a lot of terrible situations with cops. I've been through a few terrible situations with cops, and yet we still have the same mindset from when we're kids and when we're young and when we're growing. I want to, first off, thank you, not only for your insight, not only for being here for the podcast, but just as you as an individual being willing to open up and have a relationship with a police officer. That's very, very huge. It's very, very huge. And I know he's not the only officer you have a relationship with, but that's very, very big. And to see people of your caliber, right, to see the individuality that you have, and as outspoken as you are and where your mindset is, because I know where your mind is at when you speak about things, to still have all that and still be opened up, you know, to accepting this relationship with Officer McKenna is a very, very powerful thing. It may not seem like it's moving at the fast rate that it should, but just this, as small as it may seem, matters a lot. It really, really matters a lot. And again, Officer McKenna, this is something, just for me personally, seeing this and seeing how you interact with these teens and how that's the whole reason why I was wanting to and willing to do this podcast, is because it's something that really touched me and really meant a lot to me. Mm-hmm. And I wish I would have been around more officers that had this compassion that you have. Because it's a lot of compassion. I see it all the time. You know, I even when me and you aren't talking, I see how you interact with teens. Mm-hmm. And I see it. It's not fake. You know, it's not fabricated. It's very genuine and legitimate. So thank you both a lot. I really, really appreciate being able to see this and have this conversation. Now, we are coming up pretty close to the end of the podcast. So, with that being said, why don't we go ahead and throw out any closing remarks, any closing comments, any final last thoughts that's on our brains, so we could wrap it up.
Can I tell my first time ever talking to a police officer asking me something about a scenario?
Yes.
This was a little before you got to Shoreline, Greg. Okay. So my freshman year, it was like one of the sports assemblies. So we were allowed to leave.
Just don't say the officer's name.
I didn't even know the officer's name. I didn't even look at their name tag. I was so horrified. And so there was like a taco truck right by my school, and so we were going there. We went to the taco truck, we ate, and we were waiting for some other guy, another friend of ours, to come over. I don't know why, for some reason, we decided to start going back to Shorewood. And I saw some dude with a female. And I saw some other car pull up in the middle of the street. I think the guy was like talking to his girlfriend or something. He wasn't okay with that. But all I saw was him just jump the guy right there. So I was just like whoa. I was like, I've never seen somebody get jumped look in front of my eyes until that point. So like, I'm laughing. And the guy ran straight past us because we heard sirens and eventually the police came. They were like, I don't know why. We were freshmen. We were stupid. We decided to approach the school even more. We see an ambulance and a bunch of police officers come, and then one of the school counselors was outside. So the cops tell all of us to get in to talk, to ask what happened, what we saw. I'm like, it was a room not too much bigger than this, and there was like 5 police officers and the counselor, and they're asking us what I saw. So the first thing I made sure I did, I had my hands over the table the entire time. I made sure. I wasn't super scared until I looked at their waist and I was just like, wait. Like, in a joking tone in my head, I was like, so this is supposed to be a gun-free zone. See these guys' waist. I was like, I don't even want to say nothing. They asked us about the guy who, like, passed by, who, like, jumped the dude. They just all completely lied. And I was just like, yeah, what they said. I did not want to talk. I don't want to say anything. I was like so scared because like I'd never been in a small room with a bunch of police officers before.
Yeah.
And so I was
so everything's running through your mind.
Right.
They say I was the one that did it. I had nothing to do with it.
They're about to kick out all my friends and just interrogate me. So it's like from then I was just like, and then when I first introduced myself to Greg, that was the first thing I thought of because it was Barsley before him, Greg, and then that were really the only like times I've had any real experiences with the police officer at my school. And I think, other than with one slight exception, that was probably the closest I thought of getting myself into any actual kind of trouble.
Like you thought you were?
I thought I was like, I don't want to be involved with this. Like, I just want to go home. Like, I just wanted to go to the YMCA with my friends. I didn't want to be in a room with a bunch of cops.
No, that's happened to me. I remember one time I was visiting. I was in Portland, Oregon. I was visiting some family. There was like a reunion there, and I must have been about, I was like 14 or 15, and I was taking the transit. I was leaving one of the malls to get back to the hotel, and I was in the transit, and there's some kids around the same age as me, but they're all fighting inside of the transit. So they started like pushing each other, and one kid hit the other kid, and everything. And I didn't know who they were. I had nothing to do with that. I was even staying back from them. But I remember the police came, the transit stopped, and everyone flooded out. And I remember they came out, and the police were already standing there. And I remember I came out, and I tried to walk away, but then they're like, hey. And I kept walking thinking, oh, they must be like, and he's like, hey, I will chase you down. And I stopped and looked back. I was like, I don't even know who these people are. He's like, come here, come over here. Luckily, the kids even said, they're like, nah, we don't know that kid. Like, we don't know. So the kids vouched for me. So they're like, all right, you can take off. But it sucks when you get caught up in some stuff that has nothing to do with it. It even sucks more when the police are involved.
Yeah.
Then you're like, oh, Lord.
You're lucky they out didn't say, yeah, that's him. That's him.
Oh, yeah. I thought they were going to be like, he started the whole fight. He came over and tried to fight us.
I am curious, Greg. What was your first experience with the police officer?
First crazy
as a young kid.
I don't even know if I can say it on a podcast. But so Hawaii, I'm a dumb teenager with all my friends, and we do what teenagers do. And Hawaii's beautiful, and they got these beaches at night. They have this wall that goes straight out, and like I'm a joker, and they made this bet with me that I could take off all my clothes and then walk down this wall all the way down to the end of the thing and turn around. That was the bet. And I was like, okay, well, I'll take that bet. So I remember walking down this wall with nothing on, and then all of a sudden this flashlight starts coming through the woods, and my buddies took my clothes because they didn't want me to get caught, and they took off. Now I'm stuck, and now the cops are at the beach part, and they're shining their lights at me, and I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, come here. And I'm like, oh, damn it. So I walk up to him, and, my hands between my legs. I'm like, yes, sir. They go, you got any identification? I was like, I got nothing, sir.
They could tell.
Oh man, that was my first. That was my first. I mean, it's probably not appropriate, but that was my first experience. And I'm dumb. I know kids are dumb. I get it.
Oh yeah, no, I was stupid.
You're dumb, Solomon. We all know that. You will become smarter one day. But
the Cashew story is they only bet him 2 saltine crackers.
But that's why I like you so much, because I can relate to some of the dumb things you did, and I don't treat you any worse. But I do appreciate your friendship throughout high school, because it made my journey there a little bit easier. To have people like you, at least I believe that kids like me, and I like the kids. It made that job really fun, and I really appreciated that. Solomon, you're a part of that, so thanks, buddy.
All right, well, that wraps it up tonight for that wraps it up for Richmond Real Talk.
This is your host, DJ Silver. Say your outro, I guess.
Yeah, what he said. But no, yeah. So put it to an end. Like, I want to say thank you so much for coming tonight and doing this podcast with us. I know it's going to mean a lot. I know this is going to get actually some more attention and some more views than before. There's going to get a couple more eyes on this podcast, cool. Which I'm excited for. Which I know y'all excited for. So I'm really, really looking forward to hearing some of the feedback and hearing what could happen. But yeah, again, thank you very much for giving me the privilege to be able to witness this.
Yeah, thank you, DJ. Yeah, appreciate it.
And yeah, like I said in the beginning, just compassion. There's nothing more essential, more strong at this point in time in all of our lives than having compassion for one another, but also compassion for ourselves. And I know that's kind of, that seems weird because you don't hear that a lot, but we have to have compassion for ourselves too. So with that being said, thank you so much, and that wraps it up for tonight's episode of Richmond Real Talk. Solomon, go ahead and let the people know where they can find you.
I can't say any of my handles because that's not really appropriate. If I say it, will Austin bleep it out?
Let's just not say it.
Alright, that's for the better.
That's going to be a lot of editing, bro.
It's not even that
And
bad.
You can find Greg McKenna. Well, you can find Greg McKenna in uniform and in the squad car.
You can find him at City
Write
Hall.
me down.
You can find him if you do something
You can
stupid.
find me in your rearview mirror.